Thank you all for joining in. Today, I would like to keep this whole presentation short. So, we'll be touching upon these things, like, first of all, talking about the ESG, what is ESG, and how it is a boardroom discussion topic nowadays. Going forward, we'll see that how ESG creates value for the organizations, and how companies are harping onto this ESG bandwagon to uh, create a differentiator for them. Post that, we'll be touching upon the BRSR framework and how it is applicable and what are the differences that we see going forward for companies. And then we'll talk about a typical reporting journey for any company who are just starting with their sustainability or ESG reporting, and anything that where we can help. So we'll be also providing you with a handbook which simplifies the overall BRSR uh, guidelines and how a company or anyone from that point of view can use this framework to develop their BRSR reporting going forward. So yeah, let's start with ESG. So I know all of you must be aware of this term, heard about this term in the last few months so many times during the pandemic and all. So now ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. And the apt definition that I found is that it is about the company's risk management. That is how they manage their own operations to minimize the negative impact. And by impact, I mean any impact on the environment part, from the biodiversity to resource depletion to climate change. Similarly, an impact that is being created on their employees and the society where the companies have their operations. And at the same time, the impact from the company's operations in terms of the taxation, the executive remuneration, corruption practices, bribery practices, and all. So ESG covers the entirety of these three things, like how a company is governing themselves, making it a stakeholder centric company, and not only focusing on the capitalism part of the business. So now moving forward to how it became a boardroom discussion topic. So today I'm sure like you must be aware of the increase in the ESG investment front. So today global interest in the ethical investment has grown up, and by 2025 $53 trillion out of overall 140.5 trillion dollars, which is the overall asset under management, is going to be ESG centric. And that is why investors, stakeholders, and even the companies are getting interested into showcasing their ESG performance globally. Because any company who wants to tap on the capital which is given to the ESG focused companies, they would like to be on the right side of the ESG investment front. So that is why today the discussion topic around ESG has been growing, and it is going to continue in the next few years. Now, moving forward to the ESG value creation. So for ESG, it is nothing but for any company, it accounts for anything which is not non-financial disclosure. So like we all are aware with the annual reports where we have to report the annual uh, revenues as well as the profit and EBITDA data. Similarly, the non-financial disclosures are getting covered under the ESG front, and that is how companies actually can find out that what is the risk adjusted returns because of their ESG exposures in their business and the practices. It not only accounts to a cost reduction in the bottom line because of the asset optimization and overall optimization in the front of the energy requirement as well as the waste management and all. But at the same time, it also helps in the top line growth, because right now more and more customers are looking into a ESG centric or responsible company where they would be much more happy to spend their money on. Apart from that, there are multiple such benefits which gets created through value through ESG. But if I have to talk about the corporate vision towards the ESG, there are like four central themes to that. First thing that I talked about, the major push for ESG reporting is today the access to capital, because more and more investment firms and the FIIs are mandating their portfolio companies to disclose their ESG reporting, and that is why this is one of the most prominent tracks for all the companies to go for an ESG reporting. Similarly, corporate reputation and branding, because of more and more pressure from the consumers as well as from overall government perspective, like why we are talking about BRSR, it is a mandate by SEBI. So more and more regulations and customers are asking for this. So that's where corporate reputation and branding also is affected by the ESG parameters. Third thing, profitability or growth. That again is more or less uh, helping companies to reduce their cost, and at the same time in a long term they can have much more self-sufficient and sustainable value chain, which will help them to reduce their overall operations cost. And fourth thing is the compliance and risk management, because today uh, this has been the norm across the globe, like Europe, US, Southeast Asia, and even like now India, that either you follow all the responsible guidelines or you disclose. So that is how the government authorities are coming together to actually get a standardized reporting from the corporates. So that is what I would say has been prominent, and these are the four major tracks that we have seen for any ESG reporting. Now, talking about how companies are leveraging ESG. So there are a few examples from Indian companies where UPL, Mahindra, JSW, Vedanta, and Adani, these are like the big conglomerates. They are already at a higher maturity curve where they are utilizing their ESG scores to reduce their operating cost or cost of capital, while Mahindra is using it for showing their social impact. And similarly, there are multiple such mechanisms being used by JSW Vedanta to actually fund their operations through green sustainable bonds. So I will be sharing this presentation with you so you can go through it later. Now, talking about the counterparts that we have in the other geographies other than India. So, because ESG is not a new term for the global companies, they have been doing it for so many years. Now, consumer-centric companies like Costco, Kraft, they are adopting much more sustainable practices where they want to cleansify their supply chain and make use of much more sustainable products for their product packaging and all, to reduce the harm to environment. Similarly, like technological companies like HP, Oracle, they are much more focused towards the recycling and e-waste management part to improve their ESG scores. And BlackRock, being one of the biggest asset management company, they are more and more focused towards this ESG parameters, and they are compelling and mandating all their portfolio companies to have a better outlook towards the ESG, because that is going to be a big risk for them and their business going forward. Now, like gently moving towards the BRSR part, why we are here for this exact topic. BRSR is nothing but it is something that is mandated by SEBI this year for all the top 1,000 companies, and it is just a reporting format which covers the non-financial aspect of any company's disclosure. So I would like to talk about the origin and how it incorporates few other such systems or frameworks which are available for the sustainability reporting framework. So, as you all must be aware that earlier companies were mandated to report their business responsibility report, which is BRR. It is just an extension to that, along with the modifications to the national voluntary guidelines. So they have amended those guidelines to NGRBC, which stands for National Guidelines for Responsible Business Conduct, which covers 9 such reports. So I'll talk you through those 9 principles, which covers this entirety of this BRSR report. Apart from that, few concepts which are derived from such other reporting frameworks like GRI, which is Global Reporting Initiative. So that is where we are aligning India's reporting format with the global reporting frameworks, where we have included the materiality topics, which I will come to when we discuss on the BRSR framework and the structure. So that is something that is pulled from the GRI. Apart from that, the Sustainable Development Goals and United Nations Global Program, they are also party to it, and they contribute towards making this entire business responsibility and sustainability report framework for all the top 1,000 companies, listed companies in India. Um, Now talking about the general structure of the BRSR. So BRSR has three major segments, which is primarily general disclosures, which talks about the company's operations and the products and services that they give, the markets that they are present in, and how financially they are operating, and all those structures. So here the major change that I would say has come in from BRR to BRSR is that now earlier BRR was much more focused towards the qualitative disclosures, where it was just a tick mark exercise for all the companies that are you following these guidelines or not. But now companies will have to be much more precise in terms of what they are disclosing, because they will have to link all the ESG disclosures to their products and services, which is getting them all the revenues. So they'll have to start their storytelling with a precise product or the service that they are selling or they are marketing. So second segment is about the management process disclosures. So it is basically an overview of all the 9 principles, where do you have any policies, how those policies are implemented and monitored, who is responsible for the monitoring, and what are the mechanisms to actually evaluate their performance. So that is a quantitative disclosure, I would say. And third thing, the third sector or the segment is the principalized performance, where each and every principle has their own format, where companies will have to disclose a much detailed and much quantitative data towards the environmental, social, and governance terms. So I'll come to that. Now, one thing that is new in the BRSR framework is the mandatory and non-mandatory part. So earlier with BRR, it was the entire format was mandatory for all the companies, but now with the new format of BRSR, companies have been given a choice to either disclose only the essential part, which comes under the essential indicators, but at the same time, any company who wants to be seen as the leader in the ESG front, for them, leadership indicators are also being added. So any company who wants to peak their performance on the ESG side, for them, ESG disclosures on the leadership indicators are something which they should look upon. Now, like, I'll just skim through the 9 principles which are there in the NGRBC. So it all talks about the ethics, transparency, human rights, how we are taking care of the employee well-being, and our responsibility towards all the stakeholders, environment, and so similar things. So there are like 9 different principles which accounts into each and every topic, and they go deeper in terms of quantifying those things and how companies are tackling that. So talking about that, now while companies are switching from the earlier BRR reporting to BRSR reporting, they would face a challenge in these areas. So first of all would be that earlier BRR was applicable for the top 1,000 companies, which is again true for BRSR. But at the same time, this is something that will need companies to come up with the materiality topics. So by materiality topics, what do I mean is that any company will have to have all the stakeholders mapped first, and based on that, anything which they feel because of their operations, their products and services is going to affect the environmental part or the social part um, of their interaction or the touch points, how they see that as a risk or an opportunity for their business expansion, and how they want to tackle that in their business strategy. So these are the few things which will get covered in the materiality aspect, and this is something that is derived from the GRI, as I mentioned earlier. So this will be something which will be new for companies who are not doing any sustainability report earlier. But if someone who has been very much familiar with the GRI or any other international sustainability reporting frameworks, it will be an easy thing for them. But for those companies who are just starting their journey, it is something that will take time and need some efforts there from top management. Similarly, second challenge would be the disclosure point of view. So earlier, as BRR was just a part of the annual report, which was mandated for the companies, but now with the BRSR, it is going to be a digital format which needs to be uploaded to the MCA site. So what will happen here is that not only the MCA will have a statement of record of all the company's ESG performance over the years, but at the same time, there is a chance that they can develop a BRS index for Indian businesses so that they can evaluate their performance and have a rating system for that. So earlier, even though there was no such mandate for companies to have a system of records, but now there is a mandate and there is going to be a digital trail of all their ESG performance on the MCA website. Third thing, which is like the most prominent change in the BRR to BRSR reporting, is the quantitative aspect of the disclosure. So whereas earlier, as I mentioned, it was just a tick mark activity in terms of having business practices and policies in these place, and if you are tackling those situations and how you are managing that. But now companies are asking more and more questions in terms of how many such challenges have you faced in the last 1 year or in the previous financial year as well, and how are you looking at reducing those impacts. So you'll have to go through each and everything, like from the topics point of view. I will just come to that in a minute to take you through what are the ESG data how a typical ESG data looks like for a company. Fourth thing that I want to talk about is the difference between BRR and BRSR. Is that now BRSR has come up with two different templates, which is like BRR and BRSR and a BRSR Lite. So BRSR Lite is something that companies who are not listed, they can make use of, so that they are also in line with the reporting requirements of India and at the same time like globally. This is because, as you have seen, like there are multiple unicorn startups and even like non-listed companies who have higher valuation than the listed companies today. So for them, even though they are not mandated by SEBI, but it is always a good to have parameter for them to get evaluated and get benchmarked along with their peers in India. So that's why like BRSR and BRSR Lite is something that SEBI has come up with for the listed companies and the non-listed companies. So as I was talking about the ESG data, a typical ESG data which covers not only this, but it is just a generic overview of which gets covered under the environmental and the social and the governance part. So a company's energy consumption data, their emissions data, water consumption data, and waste management data is something which will get covered under the environmental part. So for BRSR reporting, you'll have to go much deeper, where you'll have to account for each and every GHG emission gas data, how much waste are you collecting out of that, how much are you recycling and reusing. So there are multiple such things. So already it is available on the SEBI website, and we can share it with you as well after the webinar. Similarly, from a social point of view, how companies are adopting and ensuring the employee well-being, safety at their operations and the premises, the human rights and labor laws, how they are implementing that and ensuring that, and similarly like the diversity, inclusion, the data privacy part, which also gets incorporated and being evaluated on the ESG front. And governance is more from the executive remuneration, accountability, ethical conduct point of view. So there are like so much of discussion on the governance part, because that is the central theme beyond for the environmental and governance aspect, because every company, even though they have their exposure on the environmental and social part. It is the job of the governance, which should tie all these things together. So now, one typical question that we get from all the organizations is that how should I get that data, and where will I get that data for my organization? So any data which relates to the consumption of the materials, and any data which is from the safety aspect, emission data. So all these data, either in the form of structured or unstructured format, will be there in your system or on the public feed, which gets accounted towards the ESG reporting. And I'm just talking about the ESG, not about the BRSR here, because BRSR is not that comprehensive. But when companies look at ESG, it should be in totality. That's why I'm talking about ESG data from a broader perspective. And for data sources, the most prominent data source for any company would be the ERP systems or the HRMS systems of the companies. And if companies have their own MI systems developed for their management reviews and the board discussions, that will be handy for them to evaluate and track their ESG performance. So all these data points needs to be collated, calculated, and measured to actually visualize any company's ESG rating. So by rating, what do I mean? Because today, even though BRSR was not there, rating agencies were there for the last few years, like Dow Jones Sustainability Index, uh, S&P Global's ESG Index, and even MSCI have their own ESG index. This year, CRISIL also came up with their own ESG rating for the 225 companies in India who are disclosing ESG. So going forward, we see so many other companies and rating agencies coming forward with their own frameworks to evaluate ESG, and that's how the financial capital flow will be determined by the ratings of these companies. Now, just jumping on to the typical ESG journey for any company, it is going to be more or less starting with an internal team setup, which will be so we'll have a three-step strategy where first thing will be discovery, then strategize and disclose. So in discovery, any company who just getting started with their sustainability reporting, it will be more for internal team setup and finalizing which reporting framework that they want to go for. Like BRSR is one. Similarly, GRI and so many other reporting formats are there. Third thing would be the stakeholder mapping and the mortality assessments. So these four topics, which are the essential part for boundary setting of your report, is very much fundamental and very much important to go forward, because that is where any company will be able to analyze that which data points needs to be collected and how they can improve on those parameters. Second part would be the strategized part, where companies would be evaluating their data or their ESG performance along with their peers in Indian geography or globally. And that will help them with a gap analysis to evaluate where they stand today and how they can improve these performance. And accordingly, they will be setting their targets and goals so that they can either commit for net zero, or they can follow any science-based targets to be compliant with the climate change and reduce their risks and vulnerabilities for climate actions and all those things. And third thing is the disclosure part, where they all the management team or the ESG committee is responsible for having performance metrics fixed, and similarly assigning KPIs to all the organization, and setting up a communication strategy, because here we are dealing with multiple stakeholders, where investors, customers, your wherever you have operations, the society, and all your employees are part of it. So there will be multiple such communication strategy for that, how you want to show that you are an ESG focused company for your employees, for your consumers, and for your community. And then going forward, like ESG performance reporting and any business alignment which needs to be corrected or adjusted has to be evaluated by the board of directors to actually see that how ESG will mature in the company. Now, any company who have just started their journey in the sustainability front, or any company who have been doing this for the last 10-15 years, so they fall under these three maturity buckets, which are foundational, advanced, and leading. So what do I mean by that is that today any company which is just starting with this, they would need help from third-party agencies to actually help them which data needs to be collected and how they should account for that and all. And these things will be fairly done through emails, Excel sheets, and manually process the data or calculate the data. So once the companies are already matured with the data collection and reporting format, they'll be in the advanced stage where they are having some sort of business analytics to that, so that they can orient their business strategies and have a much better view of their supply chain, how they can improve or reduce this costs, and cost optimization, resource optimization part is where the advanced companies will be looking at. But while we are talking about this, a leading company would be having much better data purview of their ESG performance, and they would be evaluating their business strategies on these ESG risks. So by that, what do I mean is that they will have a dollar value to the carbon emissions that they are incurring right now, and they will very well evaluate that how we can improve the performance and how will we be relevant to all our customers, investors, and how the business strategy needs to be reoriented. So that is how like a whole ecosystem building for collaboration efforts and reorienting your whole marketing, branding, as well as the product direction towards this ESG centric disclosure is going to be the main focus for the leading companies. Now, just like I'd like to wrap it up talking about us and what we do. Like we are into the space of ESG consulting in the technology side. So we are simplifying the overall ESG reporting journey for the companies, where we'll be automating the entire process of data collection, calculation, measuring, and having a disclosure as per the BRSR or any global reporting forward. Because in the core, we started off this company with the vision that sustainability is a very important part of every company's growth. And for us, sustainability means that we are meeting the needs of today without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. So that is where we come from, and we expertise in the area of like ESG scorecarding, uh, carbon footprinting, life cycle assessments, and disclosure reporting framework. And we have our services aligned towards these all the factors, where we not only support companies on the BRSR front, but at the same time other reporting frameworks which are IFC, Global World Guidelines, ILO Guidelines, GRI, and such other reporting frameworks which are globally accepted. So we do have our services and products in these areas which covers environmental, social, and governance aspect, and we help companies with the materiality assessment and the overall gradual movement on the ESG maturity curve. So we are already working with few of the big corporates in India, and we are helping them have their ESG reports and the BRSR reports built and disclosed as per the regulatory norms or as per the voluntary requirements. And yeah, that's it from my end. And now, any questions that you might have, I'll be happy to answer those. Anyone, any question? I don't. You can just unmute yourself and ask if you have anything to clarify. Well, Sai, this is a good question. Like BRSR, how it is different from the BRSR Lite. So as of now, BRSR and BRSR Lite has only one definition in terms of BRSR Lite covering only the essential indicators, where leadership indicator is something that will not be a part of the BRSR Lite. But right now, even SEBI has been working on those formats, and they're yet to come up with the exact format for the BRSR Lite, because anyway, this reporting format is going to be mandatory for companies in the next financial year. So by that time, even SEBI will come up with their exact finalized format for that. But what we hope is that it will be more from the like mandatory requirement of the essential indicators, which gets covered in the Lite version of the BRSR reporting.
Abhijit, I think we have one more question from Mr. Satish. So if you can just check the chat box and you can have a look at it.
Sorry. Okay. Does the BRSR framework parameters template different across different industries? No, actually not. Right now, the BRSR framework is like universal for all the companies across sectors and industries. So they have made it a generic one where like to just account this for different industries, it would be a different requirement. So that's where the materiality part comes into play. So materiality is something which is very much centric to a company's business and the industry that they are working into. So materiality topics are aligned with that, how your business is impacting on this environmental front and the social front. So BRSR framework is general or universal for all the companies, but the materiality topics are something which will be very much centric to a particular industry. What is the acceptable balance between quantitative and qualitative outcome impact parameters serving the real interest behind BRSR framework? I would say the acceptable balance right now is that even while I was part of one of the webinars conducted by SEBI, and at that time even there was few questions in terms of the data accuracy and the disclosure point of view. Even though it is mandatory for all the companies from next year, how easy it would be for all the companies to come up with all the data, because it might be possible the companies are not at all uh, reporting or let's say collecting the data as of now. So that is where even they had a very I would say like long horizon where they see that companies would be starting off their ESG or BRSR journey from today itself, so that they have at least mandatory data ready with them by next financial year. And when they start collecting much more data, which is from the leadership indicators point of view, that is where they will be able to do a justice in terms of the data accuracy and make those assumptions much more correct and much more I would say accurate, because today we'll be working on the averages where everything is like on a country level, but when companies start collecting data, and they will have their own averages and own accurate data going forward. I hope that answers your question. Yeah. So yes, I like right now, if Adani Gas doesn't have a sustainable policy, so policy in that sense, there is no requirement for having a sustainable policy as of now. It is basically the NGRBC, which is mandatory for all the companies who are listed. So for them, if you have your policies which are centric towards these 9 principles, even then that is fine. You don't have to have a unified policy which takes care of the overall sustainability part of the operations of any company. But at the same time, it will be beneficial to have all the things together, because otherwise the BRSR quantitative as well as the qualitative data requirement also mandates companies to have a web link for all the policies that are there on those principles. So it would be helpful if you have a unified policy there. How BRSR is different from IR reporting. And yeah, so IR reporting, they have like 5 models where they have like financial equity, and so there are like 5 principles for the IR. And IR is like it is one framework that companies adopt for their annual reporting, which covers even the financial and the non-financial part, the human capital and the financial capital, all those things. But BRSR is more centric towards the ESG disclosures. For now, like companies who have been doing the integrated reporting, and even SEBI has recommended every company to adopt the IR policies, which accounts all the BRSR topics and at the same time much larger topics which are getting accounted in the IR. So BRSR also gives the flexibility to companies to have a cross-linking. So if you are already having an IR framework in place, or let's say GRI or any other global framework that you are already reporting, then you don't need to have a dual report for that matter. You can just prescribe that format, or have a link, or just mention the page number of that annual report to be compliant with the BRSR thing. So you don't have to do a double reporting there. So from a policy point of view, right now, so in the BRSR reporting, they asks data from the financial year that we are reporting as well as the previous financial year. So by that logic, if I have to tell that how long the policy should be implemented, so then should be from last this year's April, so that we have this year's data as well as next year's data to be disclosed on the the mandatory report for BRSR. So even if the companies are just starting their journey, it is okay, because that is what we see, that companies will be just framing their policies and implementing those policies. So for the first 1 year, or let's say 2 years, it is acceptable to have the policies being implemented subsequently after it has got mandatory for all the companies. Yes, so BRSR is going to be a part of the annual report, like from 2023. So it has, like, the director's report, you will have to, the BRR report will get replaced by the BRSR. So that is where it is going to be replaced by the BRR is going to be replaced by the BRSR report. Yeah, Shreya, so it's a very good question. So with COP26 coming in, and we see that this is like a first step from the regulator's point of view to actually standardize the environmental disclosures part as well as the social and governance disclosures part by Indian companies, because right now hardly, like, handful of the companies have been doing this from like typical sectors point of view. Like from my experience of working in the oil and gas sector, I know that those companies have been doing this for the past 10-15 years, and similarly few other companies who have been the leaders for, say, like cement industry, and like few big conglomerates and the group companies, they have been doing this for the past few years. But now with COP26 coming in and so much eyeballs on this, and even India is right now like in line with setting up their net zero targets and all. So that's where this disclosures are very much helpful, and it will be a stepping stone for all the companies to get into that mindset to actually know where they stand, because today we don't have a single framework. This is a confusion part for all the companies, that if I am doing a GRI report, why do I need to go for a IR report, or let's say any other report which is mandatory for them in US and Europe in geography, like the SASB and DCFT. So that's where this standardization, or like initial step for all the companies to start with this, is a good move, I would say, from the regulatory point of view. As companies mature in the ESG front, they will also feel the need that we need to do more from the reporting and disclosure point of view. That is where they will adopt the IR policies, IR framework, or let's say GRI or any other framework, so that they are also compliant and very much lucrative for the investors present globally. So that is how I think it will be evolving, and COP26 is only going to help us do that. Yeah, so internal employees of the company, actually they need to know and understand that what is going on from the ESG point of view. Because let's say you as a company, if you have, let's say, formulated some policies which are directed towards the ESG framework or ESG goals that companies are set. So now the goals are set by the top management, but at the same time, the execution or the like executives who are on the field or the frontliners, they should know and they should understand that why these policies are applicable and what are the impacts that are going to get created by implementing or adopting to the new policies that are mandated to them, or let's say a company is adopting. So that's where it is very much important to align employees and give them a view of what company is doing, because not only it will help you uh, achieve your company's ESG goals, but at the same time, what we have seen from employee retention, and they also feel that they are a part of this whole movement, saving the planet and for the climate action. And similarly, they are working for a responsible company. So that is where the employee engagement part and employee well-being, all those things needs to be uh, working together in conjunction with the policies from the top-down approach. So that's why like a bottoms-up approach would actually help here. Sanjeev's question is that, is there a regulatory system of assurance to BRSR data, like any agency for SR data such as KPMG? So right now, yeah, like for BRSR, there is no regulatory system of assurance uh, by, like, there is no recommended party or recommended consultant by SEBI, but at the same time, all the consulting companies, the big fours like KPMG, UI, Deloitte, and even for that matter, us, Oren, we do help you with the assurance part, because that is also one need. Like in BRSR, while you are disclosing your emissions or let's say water management, waste management calculations, there is a line where BRSR asks that is it being verified by any third party and is there any assurance given from them or not. So that is how it works. So there is going to be assurance part developed while we are talking, and all the big fours are going to be helping companies there. And even like we are helping all the other companies who are engaged with us right now to build their BRSR report and assure them with the calculation and the measurement part. So yeah, anything else that I can answer for you? We still have like 10 minutes left, so I think we are very much well in time. Oh, okay. How Oren can simplify the whole process of BRSR reporting? So what we do, we are actually helping you automate this entire journey. So like I mentioned that ESG data is not something which is readily available with organizations as of now. So for them, all the data points are residing in silos. So it can be in the ERP systems or MIS systems or the HRMS systems. So like employee data, your employee training data, their pay and the training and all those data, safety data. So there will be different such systems or software tools that companies are using. So it will be there, and with the teams which are responsible for that. Similarly, all the ERP systems, they will have the consumption data and other, let's say, emissions data from the process point of view. So what we are doing, we are actually automating this entire part of data collection so that we can eliminate the to and fro communication or manual intervention there. Because the majority thing or the major challenges that we have seen as of now is that while communicating with internal teams, you reach out to the HR department saying that we need this data for this month. So for them, there will be much other priorities which they will be addressing to first. And so the whole data collection part takes around 10 plus months as of now, just internally to collect and report. So that is where we'll be reducing the 10 months to minutes, so that all the data gets collected in a single platform and you don't see it in silos, but in a unified view. Secondly, like I mentioned, that calculations are something that has to be done manually, because right now we are working on averages, but going forward it will be much more accurate, where all the companies starts disclosing their ESG data and their carbon footprints. So that is where everything will be dynamic, and that is where also we have a repository which have all the data from different locations and different geographies, which will automate this entire calculation and measurement part, so that companies can have a unified view that how am I in terms of my ESG performance, what are the risks, and how I should tackle it. And they can then channel their ESG initiatives, goals, targets based on their performance on the dashboard. So that is how we are trying to simplify this entire ESG journey. And the last thing will be the disclosure. So one-click reporting in any number of formats that the companies want. So it can be BRSR, GRI, SASB, any format that they want. Yeah, thank you, Sanjeev. Thank you, Sai. Thank you, Satish, Nitesh, everyone, Shreya, Veera. It was like really engaging session. I hope I was able to answer all your questions. But if there is anything, you can just hit me up on my email ID. I'll just write it down here. Yeah, so any questions that you have on the BRSR front or from a ESG point of view, I'll be happy to answer those questions and simplify as much as possible. And you can directly reach out to me on this. One thing that we'll do, like I will share a BRSR handbook with all of you so that you have a ready-made handbook for you to start your ESG journey if you are doing that. But otherwise, also it can be helpful in terms of giving you a guideline to like adopt those BRSR practices. So that's what I think would be helpful. So I'll be sending across those handbooks as well as a thank you email to you all. So yeah, we are very much well before time. So I don't want to stretch your Sunday and like bore you with the BRSR part. So we can wrap it up and end this meeting. And it was nice having all of you and discussing on the BRSR topic.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you everyone. Have a nice day.
Thank you, sir.